Good evening. My name is Lisa Magana. I am the Associate Dean of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion here in the college. I am also the Provost Fellow for HSI initiatives. For those of you that don't know, ASU now has a 25% of Latino students here at ASU, which is a tremendous achievement, which means it opens up lots of opportunities for our students here at ASU, faculty, and of course the community at large. I am so honored and thrilled. Every time we talk to the Secretary's office, the word thrilled kept coming up, and I got to think of a better word than just keep saying thrilled, but I'm thrilled. Before we go on with tonight's event, I have to acknowledge the staff and the team here in the college, particularly Ellison Connell and Aida Lyon. They have been fantastic and wonderful and helpful. With gratitude, thank you so much for all you've done for us today. I first want to, yes, let's they've been tremendous. We've been so grateful. Okay, so when we started talking about this event, and we said, wouldn't it be great? Wouldn't it be fantastic to have an event like this? We said, well, if we do this, we've got to bring in Chris Mudding. There's no way this is going to happen unless we bring in Chris Mudding. So let me tell you a little bit about Chris Mudding. Chris Mudding is a professor and an archivist historian at ASU. She is the founder of the prestigious archival repository, the Chicano Research Collection and Archives at Hayden Library. As adjunct faculty association in the college, she taught courses on the history of Mexican Americans. The National Association for Chicana and Chicano Studies awarded Dr. Marin its Community Award in recognition for her scholarship and commitment to the Latino community as an archivist and historian in the field of Chicano and Chicana studies. Arizona Humanities awarded Dr. Marin the Juliana Yoder Friend of the Humanities Award that recognizes individuals who made a lasting contribution to the cultural life, communities through their publications and public humanities work. And I should add that she was on Secretary Fontes's thesis committee. So a high distinction. So can we all take a moment to honor Professor? Yes, please stand. I now have the honor of introducing our Provost, Executive Vice President and University Provost, Dr. Nancy Gonzalez. She's here, she's an Arizona native and lifelong resident and an ASU alumni. Along her role as a professor, Nancy has served in many leadership roles over the course of her career at ASU. Prior to serving as provost, she was Dean of Natural Sciences, Dean of Faculty, and Director of the REACH, Research and Education Advancing Children's Health Institute. She is a fellow of the American Psychological Association and the recipient of many professional honors, including Distinguished Career Awards from the American Psychological Association, the Society for Research on Adolescence, and the Society for Prevention Research. She was named an Arizona Latina Trailblazer, received the Founders Day Award for Research from the ASU Alumni Association, and was named one of the 2021 most influential women in Arizona. Over the past 20 years, her research has been funded by the National Institutes of Health, the National Science Foundation, the Helios Education Foundation, and the Institute for Educational Sciences. And she has contributed important insights into the cultural strengths, challenges, and positive development of Latinx youth living in the varied communities in the U.S. I'd like to welcome Nancy. I'd like to welcome Provost Gonzalez.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here. And I just have to point out that Chris Mudding here is from Globe, which is rival to my hometown, Miami. We still manage to get along, but we also have Nogales here represented. So anyway, we won't get into historical feuds over time. anyway, it's my sincere pleasure to be here tonight, to thank you, Lisa, and say good evening to everybody. I'm honored to join you for this special evening as we welcome Secretary Adrian Fontes back to ASU and to learn more about his life and journey. Like me, Secretary Fontes is an Arizona native and an ASU alum. He has spent his career fighting for justice and democracy as a veteran, attorney, and elections administrator, all three very difficult jobs. Before attending college here at ASU, Fontes served active duty in the United States Marine Corps from 1992 to 1996 and was nominated for a meritorious commission. He later earned a bachelor's degree in communications from ASU and then a law degree from the University of Denver. Fontes returned to Arizona as a prosecutor for the Maricopa County Attorney's Office and went on to lead the International Prosecution Unit at the Arizona Attorney General's Office. He ran for office in 2016 after practicing law and was elected the Maricopa County Recorder. And in 2022, Adrian Fontes was elected as Arizona's 21st Secretary of State. Secretary Fontes, we are inspired by your story and grateful for your public service. On behalf of the entire ASU community, as well as Iracema Coronado, Director of School of Transporter Studies, here with us today in the beautiful turquoise, and Kevin Correa, Clinical Assistant Professor and Program Coordinator of Higher and Post-Secondary Education, and President of our Chicano Latino Faculty Staff Association. We welcome and thank you sincerely for taking the time out of your demanding schedule to be with us here today.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. The first question we have for you tonight, the School of Transporter Studies, the only one of its kind in the United States, promotes academic excellence and social change by developing cutting-edge interdisciplinary knowledge regarding the populations of the U.S.-Mexico transporter space and beyond. Can you speak to your own experience growing up on the border in Nogales and how this shaped your own educational journey and career in law and public service?
That should only take about 4 hours. So, no, first of all, thank you very much for having me. Thanks to the college and Arizona State University. It's incredibly humbling to be sitting here in Armstrong Hall. I remember as an undergrad, the Arizona Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court occasionally would have oral arguments here when this was the law school. This was always a very vaunted place in my mind, and I'm very deeply connected to this campus, having attended Arizona State football games since I was 2 years old when Frank Kush was still coaching back in the early 70s before the Upper Bowl was built. Growing up in Nogales is one of the most amazing experiences anybody could have, because sometimes the only way you knew which side of the border you were on was by looking at what flag was flying over the bank that you were closest to. It is the epitome of two worlds in one space, and you really have to, I think, have experienced it during the time and the shift that I did. When I was about 11 years old, I started going on my own into Nogales, Sonora to get my hair cut on my bicycle. And by then, we were already living north of town. I started by living inside of Nogales, just behind the old city hall in Villa Coronado. And let me take half a step back. I have an ancestor that heard mass given by Father Kino in 1695 in Janos, Chihuahua. So the Fontes family's been in the Sonoran Desert for a very, very long time. When I speak to the idea of being from Nogales, it goes way beyond just Arizona or U.S., Mexico. It goes back several regimes and several governments in the past. At the time, it was a region called Nueva Andalucia, which ran from the Gila River down to the southern tip of Sinaloa. The capital was a place called San Miguel de Orcasitas, and I just met a week and a half ago another distant cousin whose grandfather was born in San Miguel de Orcasitas, and you'd never be able to tell because he was only about this tall, very fair skin, blue eyes, and he was bald. I'm working on the bald, but the other ones I'm not going to get to. Anyway, as to the question, imagine from your youngest age having to figure out two different places, two different spaces. And I think it's one of the things that we have kinship with our indigenous brothers and sisters here, who will go back to their home communities. And you might just be going across, the 101 to the east, and you're in a different world. That's sort of what it was like for us. We spoke English in the classroom, and we spoke Spanish on the schoolyard in the same day. My parents were very strict. They said, when you're speaking English, you speak English. When you're speaking Spanish, you speak Spanish. But it was also a very cosmopolitan town, of all things. Unlike our good friends in Douglas, Agua Prieta, or in San Luis Rio Colorado, Yuma, Somerton areas, Nogales was a very, very rich north-south railroad town, border crossing, customs. And so it wasn't unusual to go to a friend's house and hear a grandmother speaking in Greek or Lebanese or Yiddish. We had several Jewish merchant families there. And it was a very, very interesting place. A lot of people, I was talking to somebody earlier, sometimes I'll get going and people will say, like, are you from New York? And I'm like, no, I'm from Nogales. It's just the way it is there. So it's a very unique place, lots of different layers, lots of interesting things. And I think one of the sad pieces of it is that so few people, oh my God, you guys are going to actually do this, right? So many different things happen in Nogales, so many different layers. It's really very hard to describe. But I hope that gives you just a little bit of a taste of, where we were and how things work. Where did you get these photographs from? I haven't seen this slideshow, by the way. So anyway, Kevin, go ahead.
All right. So now I want to talk about commitment to service. So your commitment to public service started years before you became an elected official. ASU and the college value the service of civilians and military, veterans, active duty military members, ROTC students, and families. So the question is, what lessons did you learn during your time in the Marine Corps, and how does that apply to your commitment to service?
Well, it goes before the Marine Corps. My family is, my grandfather, my dad's father was a railroad guy. He worked for the Southern Pacific there in the railroad yard. I think he ended up being the yard master, but he was there for 41 years. His father worked for the railroad in Nogales and in Tucson. His father worked for the railroad as well. In fact, they had a brother, my great-grandfather's, either his brother or one of his cousins, was one of those folks who, during the Cuartelazo, when VS people were coming north, and Lieutenant Patton at the time and General Pershing were stationed at Camp Little in Nogales, they're like, what do you do? What do you do? What do you do? And he's like, I'm an engineer. And they said, okay, you're good to go. And as he was walking away from the crowd, they executed everybody else. So the idea of service sometimes is about survival. In that instance, it was individual survival, but in other instances, it's about survival of families, economic survival, right? It's about being part of a community and helping your community do the things they need to do. So it's multidimensional. When I enlisted in the Marine Corps, I didn't ask my parents. I was 22 years old at the time. I had, there's me and my grandfather. He was the mayor of Nogales for a while. And then my mom, she's still very feisty. And if you donated to my campaign, she probably wrote you a postcard. So just I'm not fundraising here today, folks, but I might be up later. Anyway, one of the things that I learned in the Marine Corps that was more important than anything else was that it was this idea that we're, as a unit in our platoon, our drill instructors would tell us that a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And so the competition that we had intra-platoon wasn't about necessarily being the best, although that was part of the competition, but it was also about being better than, not being the worst, not being the guy that broke the chain, not being the link that broke the chain. And so everybody was actually really in it together, and everybody needed to be better than they thought they could be, because you didn't want to be that link that broke the chain. That's how important the unit was. And we learned that we were all in it together, right? If we let one of our guys down by not helping them out, by not helping them up, then the entire unit paid. And that was bad. So a little negative motivation, but it worked. And I still think that the examples that I have from generations ago, or my grandfather, or anybody else, in a small town like Nogales, it was about your communities, your neighbors, because the school board was a board that was interested in your neighbors' kids, kids that we were on the same street with. The city council was about garbage collection in for your friends and your families and your neighbors. And again, taking it back to Nogales, that was a place where you were never, ever, ever more than about a 10 or 12-minute walk away from a house that you could go to at 2 o'clock in the morning and knock on the door and be welcomed in. It was really a community, right? And that was really comforting. And so coming from there, we cared about all of the people in our community. And interestingly, coming from a family that had a little bit of political this and political that, you'd see people fighting about this political thing, and then a few months later, they were allied against other people on that political thing. So those fights were temporary as well, but it was all in the interest of service. And in the Marine Corps, look, you know, I wanted to serve. I wanted to serve, and I wrote this country a blank check payable with my life because it was that important to me. And I enlisted in the Marine Corps because that's my grandfather and grandmother on their 50th anniversary. He was in the Navy. He actually was born in Naco. He got his citizenship because he served in the U.S. Navy during World War II. We used to honor folks with citizenship when they'd serve this country. I think we should get back to that. In any event, service is about giving. It's about gratitude. It's about paying back. And if you're lucky enough to be that generous, it comes back again to you tenfold. I'm one of the luckiest guys in the world. We might get into my history. It's a little colorful. I had some fun. Don't ask Chris; she'll tell you too many stories. But it's serving has given me a chance at redemption. It's given me a chance to give back and to share, and that's nothing could be better. Yeah.
How has your degree in communications and your experiences at ASU shaped your career and life? What lessons would you share with current students about the value of education?
Well, I got a communication degree because I wanted to be, when I got out of the Marine Corps, and I actually started at ASU in 1988. You notice I didn't graduate till 98, and that's because my first several years here, I did what a lot of Sun Devils do. I lost my full ride scholarship because I had too much fun. I mean, that's what a lot of Sun Devils do. And I was an irresponsible knucklehead. There may be some of you in here who've experienced that. And I had to leave. And when I came back after my enlistment in the Marine Corps, I realized what I wanted to do. And what I wanted to do was be a trial lawyer. I wanted to get up in front of juries and make arguments and have that intellectual challenge. It might be because my mom and I argued all the time when I was a kid. But I found in the communication department at the time, under the tutelage of Fred Corey, and Chris was there for my honors thesis, that the emphasis, they had 5 different areas and you had to pick 2 emphases. I chose rhetoric and performance studies. And I didn't want to do pre-law. I wanted to do something else. I wanted to be able to communicate well. And I found storytelling. I found the works of Joseph Campbell and the mythologists. I found that it is the most human of, and I'm going to get a little philosophical here because this is kind of where it started developing in me. I believe that our divinity, and it doesn't matter, you know, and I'm not making any judgments here. If you believe, you don't believe, whatever your path, your spiritual path happens to be. I believe that the divine spark exists in humanity because we can tell stories across space and time and geography. Because I can take a myth like Gilgamesh that was written in stone in a language that I'll never be able to speak. And it's from a culture that I will never be able to identify with, but I can still learn lessons from that story. And it's a uniquely human thing. It's what's given us math and poetry and music, and it's what learning is about. Everything that you look at, everything that you study, all of our courses along the way are about stories. It's history, it's sociology, it's psychology, it's math, it's science, it's engineering, it's how we got to the moon, it's the cell phone in your pocket. It's all storytelling. And so that's what I discovered in the communication department. And when I did my thesis, it was about a journey. It was about a pilgrimage, which in and of itself is mixed in with so many different kinds of stories and storytelling. So that served me because the exchange of ideas through storytelling is exactly what it means to be a good trial lawyer. It's exactly what it means to be a good politician. It's exactly what it means to be a good professor, to be a good salesman, to be a good engineer and share your ideas. Everything that we do, to be a mathematician, you've got to be able to tell stories, but the symbolic language is different. It's still a symbolic language and it's still a story to be understood. That to me is the spark of divinity, and that's what I learned when I was here as an undergrad. I just hadn't figured it out until many years later. So I hope that answers the question. Sorry, I got a little philosophical there, sorry. I like to keep it lighter most of the time.
Message do you have for our students?
What message do I have for your students? Screw up now. I'm not kidding. Do it now. Look, I'm the Secretary of State. I'm only the second Latino ever to be elected statewide in Arizona's history. By the way, the other one, Raul Castro, who was governor in, I think, 1978, I sit at his desk. I had the museum bring his desk up into my office just to honor that legacy. There's only one other executive in Arizona's history who's Latino, and that's Jaime Molera, who took my sister to the Heart Fund Ball when they were juniors in high school. And Raul Castro is a very strong Nogales ties guy. When he came from Nogales, or from Mexico, they were in Nogales. So the secret for your students is, if you're Latino and you want to be in high office in Arizona, go to Nogales and hang out for a while first. But really, screw up now. Make your mistakes now. Have your adventures now. Reach out now. Dare now. Because if you take that straight and narrow path to a goal that you think you have in your mind right now, that's not where you're going to end up. You guys all know this. There's very few people in the world are lucky enough to set that goal when they're young and then go straight to it. And that's where they end up. And I don't know that I should characterize that as luck, because it's so much more interesting to have a life where you just look at several options and you move ahead and you see where life pulls you and tugs you, because you're not doing it on your own. You've got all these external forces that are going to pull you and tug you one direction: family tragedy, family wonderful joys, health, economies, geographies. Let the world happen around you while you happen in the world. Like I tell people, don't set your mind on just one thing, particularly if you're young. It's a big deal, and it goes so fast. Like, being narrow at this stage of the game is just not, I don't think it's a good idea. Although I know your academic advisors hate that idea, and your professors are like, pick now. No, run and see which direction the wind shifts you.
How many majors did you say you had at ASU?
Oh, I was telling Kevin, I started as a secondary ed geography major, and about 8 majors later and 10 years later, I graduated with a BA in communication.
Excellent. Great example. So now we want to shift to something that's on a lot of people's mind. It's been in the news lately. You had an op-ed in Newsweek this week, and it's all around the topic of democracy and the future of democracy. In your bio, you state that you are committed to preserving integrity in Arizona's elections, making voting easier for registered voters, and ensuring that the business community has a nonpartisan partner in the Secretary's office. Can you elaborate on what you mean by that?
Yeah, I want to do my job, and I want to do my job well. And everybody looks at elections administration and regulation. We do the regulating, by the way, at the Secretary's office. We don't run elections. The counties run elections. Just bright line. So if they mess up, it's not my fault. No, I'm just kidding. And oh, by the way, thank you, Mr. Brnovich, for finally, we didn't mess up. We just want to do our jobs. And I just want to do my job. Public service is about service. We did it at the county recorder's office. We took an office that was very focused on what it was doing, what was easier for its staff, what was easiest for its budget. And we turned the focus outward and we said, you're the voters, you're the people buying and selling houses, you're the folks who have these fundamental rights that we are to preserve. What do you want? How can we serve you better? And I've brought that philosophy to the Secretary of State's office. And this is not a criticism of Secretary Hobbs, but she was very much hamstrung by political opposition from not only the ninth floor, but the legislature. I don't have that sort of a weight on my shoulder, at least not from the ninth floor. So we've got a little bit more space to do more. And so the idea, though, is to do the job well. And it's not just elections. That's the shiny object in the room. But we do business services. I just got, Chris, a request for some of the foreign services that we do too from Kirsten Valentine. Because Jean and their daughter passed away this year. She needs some documents apostilled out of my office so that their ashes can be taken to Greece and taken care of there. So that touches me really hard because Kirsten Valentine, who's a professor emeritus here at Arizona State, was the chair of my committee that Fred Corey and Chris served on. So that's personal, but it's not any less personal for other people. And as far as business services are concerned, there's no reason why we shouldn't be operating at the speed of business. Why in the world is it that in 2023, there are some forms that you might need to register your limited liability partnership with foreign money? And by foreign money, I mean like from Kansas or Wyoming. That's actually true, foreign to Arizona. It's a term of art. Why should it take 7 months to get the paperwork done? And why do we have some forms still that you have to download once you filled out online the PDF? You got to download it, print it, and then mail it back with a check. Right? That's nuts. You should be able to do it on your phone. So we're really looking very carefully at doing some of the things that we need to do to serve you better because it's your office. You pay that bill. You're the ones that deserve those services from us the best way we can. And doing it right isn't about what's expedient for us. It's about doing it right because that's what's just expected. And it's too bad that we're at a stage now where people just doing their jobs are getting accolades and kudos. You know what I mean? Like we see people acting honorably just by telling the truth, and suddenly Rusty Bowers is getting a medal at the White House. Why are we there? This should be the norm. And so another piece of this for the young people out there, do not expect to be rewarded for just doing what is expected of you. It's what's just expected. Also, caveat to that, never seek nor refuse an honor if it's given to you. If it's coming to you, somebody else is getting the honor of giving it to you. Don't look for it. And when it comes to you, honor them by receiving it. Don't look for it. It'll come. But don't expect it for just doing your job. You gotta get above and beyond. So I'm giving a lot of advice tonight. Is that okay?
Very okay.
Good, okay.
This is an easy question. Is it Adrian or Adrian?
Yes. Yes to both. So if my mom was here, it would be Adrian, and I'd be very, very, very strict about it. But look, I'm a guy from the border, right? It's just natural for me to answer to both names, right? There's several other names that I reluctantly answer to as well. But being from those spaces, and by we, I mean folks who are in these bicultural, bilingual, sort of multi-language places, you just get used to it. And I'll introduce myself as Adrian a lot. And sometimes I make assumptions, right? I'll introduce myself as Adrian to like a guy who's been on a mission in Chile for years. And he'll be like, isn't it Adrian? And I'm like, oh, yes. If that's what you prefer. But I like making it easier on people because I'm not that prideful. And other people have their things, but I don't, my name is my name. It's spelled the way it's spelled on my driver's license, and on my headstone, it'll be spelled the same way, right? And en el idioma de los cielos, they don't care how you pronounce it, right? That's just what it is. So I know that there's a lot of people that take a lot of pride in, you know, you're going to call me this, you're going to call me that. Why do I got to put that kind of pressure on people? You know, it's just don't be mean to me. And that's all. I mean, it's not really that complicated, I think. So you can call me whichever one you want. Yeah.
I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier about being one of just a couple of Latinos elected statewide in Arizona. And we know that representation is so important for many communities. And at the Chicano Latino Faculty Staff Association, representation and voice are some of our valued principles. I'm just wondering if you can speak a little bit about what it means to you to be a Latino in statewide government.
Well, I'll tell you, we had this amazing experience just on this point just the other day. I'm looking at Paul earlier from the office. He wasn't there. I was in a meeting with the minority leader of the House, with the minority whip of the House, and these are the Democratic, right, political minorities, with the ranking member, which is the minority member on the House Elections Committee, and another member of the minority leadership. And as we sat down and we got ready to start having our meeting, I looked around the table and I said, hey, you guys, this is a big deal. And I had George take a picture. We're all Mexicanos. Everybody around the table. And had the minority leader of Arizona's Senate been there, Senator Raquel Terán, we still would have been. So what does it mean for me right now? I'm among family. But it wasn't like that long ago. And it's been too long in coming, given that we're 30% of the population. Theoretically, we should be 30% of leadership, and that means we should have been further advanced by now. But I think one of the things that we need to realize is this. If we expect to be in a society that is multicultural, multi-ethnic, and diverse, we can never, ever, ever forget that if you are multi-ethnic, multi-whatever, you still have to be competent. You still have to be professional. You still got to spell well. You should still have decent handwriting. You still should be able to balance your checkbook. You still should be paying your taxes and be a responsible adult. The fact that you're X, fill in the blank, doesn't excuse you from any of those responsibilities. And we should never, ever, ever compromise professionalism, discipline, or ethics because of whatever we were born into. That's just happenstance, right? Some people complain about the lottery of birth. Oh, you were born into a country club family and you're white, Anglo-Saxon Protestant, and you live in Moon Valley, que esto que el otro, and people complain about that. Yeah, but if you're a bad human being, you're a bad human being. And if we complain about the lottery of birth that way, why in the world should we work less the other way? Why in the world should we compromise who we are and how we feel about ourselves and our performance vis-a-vis the rest of the world? We should be ethical. We should have a good conscience. We shouldn't try to take advantage of those things. Instead, we should try to outperform because representation matters. And because we can be as good, if not better, than whoever it is we're competing against. And if we really want to be in that multi-ethnic, multi-whatever society, that is the ultimate goal, I think, is the meritocracy, then we better be people of merit. Otherwise, we've cheapened the experience for ourselves. And we've excused ourselves because of the very same thing that we would blame others for taking advantage of. We have to be fair. We have to be ethical about this at the end. And that means we have to put the work in now.
You've spent a lifetime fighting for justice and defending our democracy. What are some projects that you have worked on that you are the most proud of?
My kids, because that's a project. Trust me, all the parents in here know. And they believe in democracy. And that's actually more true and more directly answering that question than sort of the snideness of that comment would indicate. Because the family is the smallest unit of government that exists. And when we do include others in the decision-making process, and we demand of others, even in our families, accountability for the decisions that they make, and we let them know that they can be on the winning side of a decision and they can be on the losing side of a decision, and it's okay because there's going to be another decision coming later, that's where democracy begins. As far as projects specifically are concerned, I think one of the proudest moments for me was getting the Federal Elections Assistance Commission Award for Innovation in Programming when we created the Roundtable Project at the County Recorder's Office. And it wasn't just sort of, you know, this warrior princess that popped out of my head after somebody knocked me. That's a mythological storytelling reference that some of you will know. It was a hard process that we started when I first became the county recorder. And I wanted to figure out a way to reach out to underserved and underrepresented communities. And I can't remember how many iterations we went through during that 4-year process. But at one point we hit the formula. And what we did was we identified 6 communities of traditionally underserved voters. Latinos, African Americans, our indigenous brothers and sisters, Asian American Pacific Islanders, voters with disabilities, college and university students, each of whom as a voting bloc have unique challenges. And what we did, the professor over here will tell you, is we reached directly out into these communities and we had them host us. And we would go show up and we would listen. We wouldn't show up and tell them what to do. We would show up and ask 2 questions. What are we doing well? What are we doing terribly? And how do we fix that? Right? And we did that across Maricopa County. We did it on the reservations. We did it at Asian temples. I think there was a temple up on, gosh, I want to say 12th Street and Kensabe up in Phoenix. We went to Black churches. We went to the communities. And what we did was we said, you organize your community. We're coming. We're going to be your guest. Invite the folks in your networks, not who we think should be there, who you think should be there. It's your community. You help us understand. And they did. And they did. And people get confused sometimes. They're like, why did voter turnout increase so much? Why do more people know how to vote? Why is it so easy? Well, because we not only reached out into communities that were traditionally underserved, but we spent a bunch of money reaching out to the general public on TV and radio and all this other sorts of stuff. So the outreach generally, but that program specifically was one that I'm very, very proud of. Because what ended up happening, interestingly, we built that program and then Secretary Hobbs adopted it because we started building it before she became the secretary. And so now I've inherited back a program that was sort of piggybacked off of my original program, and it's all confusing, but I'm pretty proud of that.
Jumping from that, what was the inspiration for you to become Arizona Secretary of State? It's a 3-part question. That's the first part. What were your first steps in pursuing that goal? And finally, what is an important life lesson you have learned, and how will you apply it to your time as Arizona Secretary of State?
I'm going to ask you to repeat the second 2 because I'm still stuck on the first one.
What was your inspiration to become AZ Secretary of State?
My inspiration to become Arizona Secretary of State was political ambition. You're never going to hear a politician actually say that in public. And I just did because you guys know that if I said anything else, that I'd be sitting here lying to you. But that political ambition was also coupled with the desire to serve and to actually do something good for my kids. So for 2 different reasons, it's selfish. Because I don't live in this world on my own. I live in it with my family. I happen to live in it with all the rest of you too. And because you're all part of my community, part of the constituency, I kind of did it for you guys too. I apologize, you're ranked 3rd after my kids. But that's real. And I don't know that anybody is ever going to really, we get inspired by this and inspired by, I ran for county recorder because I got pissed off that people couldn't vote. That was guts about other people. But then I figured, we're doing stuff, we can do good things. I saw what we were able to accomplish in 2020 and I thought, man, this is great. I went down to help in Tucson and I saw, wow, there's a lot of stuff around the state that can be fixed here. So, you know, when Secretary Hobbs decided to run for governor, and she and I had the conversation before she announced. Politicians, we have these chats sometimes behind the scenes. And I was like, yeah, I can run and win for Secretary of State. And I'd be able to help my kids. And I'd be able to help a lot of other people and continue the work that I started at Maricopa County. So that's really why I did it. Trust me, it's not for the $70,000 a year salary. Because I could make a hell of a lot more than that going back to practicing law. And I probably should have. Given the fact that we're building a swimming pool right now, I really regret. No, just kidding. I'm only a little kidding. But, okay, what was the second part of that three-part question?
And the second part was, what were your first steps in pursuing that goal?
Well, the first step was like literally, and I know I'm revealing way more than anybody ever should in politics. I sat with then Secretary Hobbs and I said, hey, Katie, because we're kind of on a first name basis. She was my representative many, many, many years ago. So we've known each other for a long time. I said, you going to run for governor or for secretary? She says, well, I'm running for governor. And I'm like, well, you going to announce? Because I'm not going to run against you. And if you're going to stay in this office, I'm going to run for something else. She said, no, I'm running for governor. I said, cool. When are you going to announce? Because I can't announce before you. I'm not going to announce that I'm running against you and then you announce. That just doesn't work like that. So if anybody has ever wondered, do these people talk to each other behind the scenes ahead of time? The answer is, of course, yes. We're not dum-dums. We are friends. There are a lot of us who, there's a lot of that inside stuff that goes on behind the scenes. Very few of us will actually talk about it. But it's what you expect. People talk. We're friends sometimes. Sometimes we don't get along. But that's really what ended up getting me there to make that decision.
Thank you. And then the last part is, what is an important life lesson you have learned and how will you apply it to your time now as Secretary of State?
The single most important life lesson that I've learned, and I want all of you young people, please, please, please pay attention. If you only pay attention to one thing, pay attention to this. Do not compromise who you are. Never be anything but authentic. Don't let the winds, politics, or the economics ever change who you are. Just be yourself. It is so much easier to just be yourself. And it's so much more fulfilling and gratifying to just be yourself. And if you're at that stage of your life where you just don't know, you're just not really sure who you are, take some time and figure it out. That's why you're in college. That's why you're doing your master's and your PhD or whatever the heck you guys are doing right now. But no matter what, just be who you are. Don't worry about what other people think. Because they're putting themselves on you. And you're allowing them to have power over you. Authenticity isn't just about, you know, me getting on KTAR and saying words that they have to bleep out of the broadcast. Authenticity is about loving the person who you are. And this goes for everything. I bought a pair of Kirkland jeans because it was $12 and I don't care. And my partner refused to let me wear them today. Here, I wore them all day today, but I didn't wear them here. Just be who you are. I play guitar once in a while and I sing once in a while. That's just who I am. I learned how to play cribbage in the last year, right? I'm 52. Who learns how to play cribbage in their 50s? Me, right? I switched from tequila to gin. Just because, right? Like, oh my gosh, that's a cultural offensive thing to do, but no. I mean, look, just be who you are, be authentic. Because the thing of it is, we try so hard to fit in because we're so afraid of rejection. We're so afraid that people aren't going to like who we are. And if it's anything that I've learned in politics and running for office, it is so incredibly hard to be somebody that you're not. And when you try that hard, people see right through it anyway. Right through it. Think about it. All the politicians that you guys know, who you know are full of it. You know they're full of it. Guess what? They are. They are. Because they're not themselves. And it doesn't matter what motivates, whether they're insecure or whether they have, you know, other issues or whatever. It doesn't, or they're trying to impress or they're Ted Cruz. It doesn't matter. Inauthenticity is bad. And it's bad for your heart. It's bad for your soul. Because you're just like always trying to please other people. They're sucking your energy out of you. And that's no fun. Who the hell wants to live like that? You guys are getting all the good stuff out of me tonight. Usually it takes a couple of drinks to get me here. I had one Diet Coke and a couple of pieces of chicken.
Like the punch, that's,
Ready?
that you didn't know that. What is the most important issue facing Arizona in the next election cycle?
The most important issue facing Arizona in the next election cycle is water. Water, 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 water. It's water. That's it. That's it. We live in a desert. It's water. The elections are fine. Schools, we're going to figure it out. Universities, you guys are, okay, right? We do have other issues, but for God's sakes, generationally and as an existential threat, where we are with water, we live in a desert. Look at Lake Mead. Some people are actually building swimming pools in their yards because they're worried about water. I'm one of them. And I'm not a survivalist whack job. I don't have freeze-dried ice cream in my garage. If we don't pay attention to water right now, if we should have been paying attention to it back during the Carter administration, that's the biggest deal. That is the single most important issue, bar none. We ain't got water. We don't have education. We don't have healthcare. We don't have childcare. We don't have jobs. We don't have transportation. We don't have an economy. We don't have manufacturing. We don't have anything if we don't have water. It is literally elemental to the survival of our society, our civilization here in Phoenix. Water is number one. And if we're not putting water right up front, in front of everything else, then we are fools.
Our next question comes from the audience, which is, as a native of Arizona's borderlands, how do you feel that our nation's immigration problems could be better addressed with solutions other than a wall?
Well, let me preface that by saying this is the first time in Arizona's history that the top 3 executive officers are from Arizona. The governor was born in Tempe, I was born in Nogales, and Attorney General Mays was born in Prescott. So I think that's important. I don't think that the border issues are any more important to me as a native Arizonan or as a non-native Arizonan. And I appreciate as a native Arizonan, as a native of the border, look, it's an issue. Here's the biggest issue regarding the border. We forget that like the port of Nogales does $30 billion a year in business that crosses that border. It's a massive, massive economic engine for the state of Arizona. And pre-COVID, Mexican dollars into Arizona topped over $10 million a day. And so if we just look to the border as if it's just an immigration issue, or it's just an environmental issue, then we have blinders on ourselves. And we're only paying attention to those things that we think are important to us for whatever agendas we have. It's a myopic view. And with respect to the question, if we don't have a holistic and intelligent approach to the border, which is I think what the School of Transborder Studies is looking at, right? If we don't pay attention to the biggest manganese deposit in the Western Hemisphere is opening up at the S32 mine just east of Nogales here pretty soon. And the amount of power that Tucson Electric Power is going to have to drop just to that mine is going to keep the port of Nogales from building any more electronic scanning equipment for the trucks. They're not going to build any more warehouses that have cooling capacity. You're not going to be able to import shrimp or blueberries or cucumbers up from Mexico. A mine will keep you from having shrimp. We have to be holistic in our approach to these issues. And by the way, don't we have a labor shortage in this country? Don't we have a ton of people down there who want to work here? I mean, this is like, we've really got to start paying attention to these things intelligently and as if we are not bigots. Because I think one of the biggest problems on the border is Washington, D.C. One of the biggest problems on the border is, People who don't understand the border and who've been sold on these lies for generation after generation. Like the only thing that comes over the border are problems. It's not, it's quite the opposite. Your cars come over the border, your garage door openers come over the border, right? A lot of good stuff. Some people say chimichangas came over the border, but I think they started in Tucson. That's an argument we can have another day. And no, I didn't offer any solutions. No, I didn't say directly, here's what we have to do. Because I haven't studied that. I'm not an expert in it. And I recognize that there are other people who are far better equipped to answer specifically some of those questions.
Well, this is the last question.
Bummer, I was just getting rolling.
What's your message to students who want to enter public service through elected office?
Don't. No, I'm just kidding. You guys are going to hate this answer. Let me just, I don't need a show of hands. Imagine you're a 20-year-old college student. Okay? Everybody in here, imagine you're a 20-year-old college student. Maybe when you were 20. Okay? You're 20 years old. Now think of somebody in your life who's 10 years old. Half your age. 5th grade, 6th grade, right? What's their life experience look like? What do they know? As compared to you, the 20-year-old. Okay? Now, from that 10-year-old's perspective, think about a 5-year-old kid. What does that 5-year-old know as compared to the 10-year-old? Right? They're just getting to where they're tying their shoes, 1st grade, whatever. Hopefully they're tying their shoes before then. But now from the 5-year-old's perspective, look at the 2.5-year-old kid. 2.5-year-old kid's probably still out back eating dirt, right? I was doing it. Most of you were probably doing it. Let's not pretend. You're 20 years old. You're a 20-year-old college student. How does a 40-year-old see you? Be humble enough to make the comparison and understand that while you may be talented, you may be intelligent, you may be indestructible, you may have the charisma and the guts to take on the whole wide world, you still don't know shit. And that humility will serve you very, very well if you want to be in public service. I didn't run for office for the first time until I was 46 years old. And it's not because I waited. The thought had popped into my head. My grandfather was elected mayor when I was 9 years old. It's not like it wasn't real for me. It's not like it wasn't possible for me. Maybe I just had the foresight. Maybe I just didn't get the opportunity. But now I know well enough to look back at 20-year-old kids and respectfully, I have an 18-year-old kid. I can, it's close enough. And I think, how much more can you learn? And how much better prepared can you be? And how much better will you be able to serve me as your constituent if you give yourself a little bit of grace, if you give yourself a little bit of wisdom, which comes with time. Don't rush. Don't rush into public service and make the mistake that I've seen so many people make. And I've only been in public life for a little while. I've seen that 26-year-old kid get on the school board, get up and get in like all kinds of crazy stuff. And you're like, what are you thinking? And guess what? They're done. And it's not that I think that you're untalented. And it's not that I think that you're dumb. It's not that I think you're inexperienced. I know because I've been there. And all the folks in here who've been around the sun several more times than I have know that I'm telling you the truth. Slow down. Because if you really do want to serve, service requires humility. And there's some grace in there. The gratitude that the world has given you some experience over time. Grace and humility are really important if you're going to be an authentic public servant. Consider those things in real terms. And I'm going to sit here and be the first one to tell you, I'm not trying to discourage anybody from doing it. I'm just going to tell you the truth. You're going to be moving into a space where your constituents are going to make the exact same judgment calls about you that I just made. And I don't even know any of you. Because I'm not going to blow smoke up your tail. I'm going to tell it to you like it is, even if it hurts your ego a little bit. Because that's what you deserve from someone who's been through the ringer and who has made mistakes and who has risen to be the second highest ranking officer in the state of Arizona and who's recognized nationally as an expert, who put in the time and put in the effort and went through all of that. You deserve nothing less than that from me, nothing less than the truth. So my advice to you young people, slow down. Have fun, go out, do your thing, go to Rocky Point. I'll be there for spring break. Have a good time, have some beers, do whatever. Travel, get in and out of relationships, enjoy yourself, do whatever, right? Just understand. You're a 20-year-old. How do you look to that 40-year-old or that 80-year-old who you got to serve? Grace and humility will take you so much farther. And the world's got a lot to give to you. Absorb it. Absorb it. That's the advice that I would give to young people. And then you're going to go run for office anyway next year, which is fine. I'll be excited for you. But just as long as you've got that perspective in your minds, I think it'll serve you well. It'll serve you well.
Secretary of State Adrian Fontes, on behalf of Arizona State University, faculty, students, staff, we thank you very much for being here tonight.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you.